perfect for you to do your own calls. After the buyer gets done saying a statement, you stop the call, you don't listen to the question you asked. And you say to yourself, what information do I know based on what they just said? And what is still unclear? How can I write 3 questions in the place of the 1 question I asked?
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 48 of Sales Stories in Real Life. I'm your host, Alex Bruschi, and this is the show where professional salespeople share their memorable buying experiences. Today, we've got a very special guest. You've probably seen him making some wacky videos on LinkedIn, totally going outside of the box. He is the founder of Arkenstone GTM, focusing on top of funnel and discovery execution. He is implementing his STAS model, which is sales training as a service. Welcome to the show, Ryan Scalera. Man, I'm super gassed of what we were just talking about pre-show. I'm going to cut right to the chase. I heard that you had a really awesome experience, both finding and getting upsold at a seafood restaurant that was like right around the corner. What what the heck
Yep.
happened there?
So yeah, I mean, check them out on Instagram. The guy's hilarious. Metropolitan Seafood, but it was probably like I go there on a weekly basis now. They just nailed it from beginning to end and made me like a raving fan of this place. I'm also like I'm a big foodie, so it wasn't too hard, but beautifully executed. So like to start off, like I found them because of these foodie videos that I watch on Instagram. The guy is the founder of Metropolitan. He's like half like Johnny Depp, half Guy Fieri, half like Anthony Bourdain. Like if you could put all those together, he's got a scarf and a fedora, and he just does these really epic like fish or like seafood cooking videos. So he'll be in the back of his restaurant and he'll be like, "We're making mahi mahi lemon tacos today," or something like that. And he dives right in, takes the ingredients, cooks it in front of you, clips it together, and then he eats it with a little bit of bread and like pours a glass of wine for himself. Highly entertaining. And I saw one of the videos, my mouth was like watering, and I'm like, oh man, I gotta find a good seafood place. So I go and I click on their page and I search and I find out it's right around the corner from where I just bought my new house. And I'm like, oh, I have to go over. So I walk, I drive down and I walk in, and from the very second you walk in, they're extremely open, friendly. Hey, how's it going? Let me know if you need any help. Then it leads you through a maze. So you basically, short maze, you have to walk through every section of their store and almost see everything they have to offer. And I'm like walking through, as I'm going through, I'm getting hungrier and hungrier. And then I approach the actual seafood section. They're behind the scenes. They're literally filleting fish and like preparing it all. There's these like 7 guys who like this is what they do for a career. And they're very knowledgeable and very charismatic. So they immediately get in it with me, start asking me, "Hey, is it your first time? What do you like? What kind of seafood are you into? How can we help?" And I'm like, I need some shrimp. And they're like, "All right, here's the 3 selections, but if I might recommend, like these are the ones I would do in oven. If you're gonna do a saute, this is what, and then if you're gonna do grill, these are the ones." Well, I'm grilling, so I'll take whatever, a pound and a half, 2 pounds of that. So they were like, "Do you want me to prep them, take the tails off, devein?" I'm like, absolutely, thank you so much. And then while I'm standing there and I'm just kind of waiting, I'm looking around, my eyes wander over to the oyster section. The guy mid devein, he goes, "You like oysters?" And I said, well, sort of, I'm starting to get into them. He goes, "What kinds have you had?" I'm like, "Well, I've definitely tried East Coast. I think I've tried some West Coast too. I tend to prefer East Coast." And he was like, um, Massachusetts, Canada, like where's your favorite state? I was like, oh, I don't really have a favorite state. He was like, come here real quick. So he puts the stuff down, he walks over to the oyster section, and he's like, if I may recommend, like these couple things, like these are the states that you're gonna want to try right now. They're perfect. The water's cold this season. Like you gotta try this. And I was like, definitely, I might come back and get them. And he's like, no time like the present. He takes his knife, he cracks it, he fills it out, he puts a little lime juice. He goes, typically you'd find cocktail sauce and horseradish and mignonette and all this different stuff. He's like, but if you really want to experience an oyster, it's a little bit of lime juice here. And he hands it to me, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm just about to do a raw oyster with like nothing on it in the middle of a store. I take it immediately, it like hits me. I'm like, I need a dozen. And I get a dozen. He finishes up, he packs it up for me, gets me all ready, gets me a tray. He goes, hold up 1 minute. He walks behind the counter, gets me 3 limes, puts them on there, sends me up to the counter. As I'm going up to the counter, I see these like butter toffee cashews, and I'm like, ooh. And they're like, we're doing half off on those. Perfect. Grab that, come up. They're like, if you do a rewards section, you'll get 5% off of this order. Do you want to do that? Put my phone number in. And I, as a salesperson, I am very wary of putting my phone number, email in anywhere. I immediately signed up, got 5% of the offer. I went in about to spend about $20 to $30 on like shrimp. Instead, I spent over $100 at that store that day. And then I came back the next week, and I came back the next week. And now I'm going there pretty much exclusively for oysters, trying all the different kinds. Every time I go in there, I thought I was special. Every time I go in there, they open one up for me and let me try it. It was just such a beautiful experience from them. And I felt like at home, they're talking to me about my kids, the neighborhood. They're recommending places I should go to outside of their business. It was, yeah, that's my story, but it was an awesome experience, and I love those guys so much for it.
Dude, Ryan, this is what the show is all about, right? Like you were gonna walk into somewhere, get whatever, $20 a shrimp, and you end up walking out of there spending over $100 and like now have an extended family down the street, right? Like I love everything from start to finish. So let's kind of go way back to the beginning because I think very relevant to B2B, right? Like you did not find them advertising their shrimp, right? Or, hey, I need a seafood place. Like, let me go find a seafood place. Like, you found them organically because their founder was just making entertaining, one would even maybe say edutaining, right? Education and entertaining about how to cook seafood, right? Like, and you're just drawn in, it's entertaining, it's funny. And then you sort of just happen to realize that they have a place down the street from you. So, this obviously has a lot of relation to B2B because that's how a lot of people are creating demand, right? Is by having educating videos, having entertaining videos, having some of both. So like how does that come about, right? Like when you're watching someone and they're not only teaching you but entertaining you, like what's kind of going through your head at that moment, right? Just like I got to get there, I got to try this, like this dude is hilarious, like I would love to meet him, or like what's going through your head at that moment?
So it's funny, there could be potentially 3 other seafood places in this area. I wouldn't know because the way I consume content is not through the mailer stick-ins where you open your mail, you got 5 different postcards. It's not on radio and TV ads. It's not by putting something on my windshield in a parking lot. It's definitely not by cold call or email. Um, in the seafood category at least. I found someone that I found entertaining. They got me interested, not even originally in them. It was just the fact that, ooh, this reminds me of this. It was engaging content. And then as soon as like they were the closest proximity, not even physically, for me to find a seafood place. So I click on his page just to see, oh, where's this guy at? Right around the corner, extremely easy. The SaaS equivalent or the tech sales equivalent of this would be, oh, this is a really great cold calling video or a really great email writing video that Will Allred did. Um, I would love to learn how to write better emails and I want my team to learn it. And I click on Will's profile and then I see his company says write better emails faster. And then I click on Lavender and now all of a sudden I'm downloading Lavender. I'm showing my team and I may go towards moving towards a purchase. That's what they did with food for me.
That's a perfect analogy because I was actually going to use lavender as an example. It's funny that you say that, but it's like, let's stick to the food example for now. Is like, he was teaching you how to do better seafood, whether you buy it from him or not, right? Like, that is the sweet spot. It's like, if you teach people how to do something with or without you, they're gonna come to you, right? And that's exactly what Lavender does. My good buddy Mike does 3 minute sales school. He literally takes people's emails, tears them down, rewrites them, and sends them back to them because they know that if they teach you how to write better emails, you're going to look to them for email help, and it just organically drives you to their tool. So it's such a brilliant comparison for what we're talking about here, because then once you get in the store, I love what you said. There's like the little maze, right? It's almost like IKEA. You have to see every single item. It's kind of like a journey. And then at the end of the journey, you get to the counter. And like you said, there's extremely knowledgeable people that are entertaining, that are charismatic, and they're carving the fish, and they know that they know more about seafood than you, but they're not like rubbing it in your face, right? Like, oh, hey, we're the seafood experts. Like, you listen to us. It's like, hey, what kind of oysters do you like? Right? Oh, East Coast. Oh, well, what state? Right? Like, I would never think of like, oh yeah, I really know the difference between a Massachusetts oyster and a, and a Canada oyster. But then it gets you curious, right? Like, and then you're like thinking, like, what am I missing out on? Right? Like, what's going through
Yeah.
your head at that moment?
That it was a perfect discovery question. No, like he was adept enough to watch me as he's doing something else and see where my eyes were going around the display. So once he saw me catch eyes with the oysters and look at those for a second, he was like, oh, asked a great question. And then when I like said, oh, yeah, no, I'm getting into it. I like it. Then he goes that second layer deeper. It's almost like he peeled the onion. He provoked thought in me to be like, what is the best state? What have I done versus what have I not? I knew that there was a difference between East Coast and West Coast, but I didn't know there, and I don't even know if there still is. Like it's just it was a great question. But he got me thinking, he got me really intrigued, and that kind of opened him up. It was I like it's one of those things you see in motion when you're being sold really, really well. You know what's happening the entire time, but you don't want to stop it because you're enjoying the experience and you're learning and being entertained during it.
I mean, that's the key though, is like a good buying. I think you should hit the nail on the head right there. Like a good buying process, like is enjoyable to be a part of, right? Like even though like you're being sold, you're like, oh well, let me run to the market and let me get, $20 of shrimp really quick. And you like walk out and spend 5x as much and you had a blast doing it, right? Like that's what this is all about. So let's maybe start to go a little bit more down the B2B route here. How can folks infuse this into their process, right? So like what are those kind of questions? Let's talk about like creating that kind of magic moment where someone's like, what am I missing out on, right? Where they just like lean in like that much harder. What would you kind of recommend for folks that aren't really getting to that part of their sales process, right? Maybe they're kind of like talking at their prospects and they're not really getting to those layer 2, 3, 4, etc. What kind of general advice would you give to folks to create that moment of that you had of, hey, what state is your favorite oyster from, right? Like, how do people create that in their B2B selling process?
So I always, peeling the onion is an interesting thing. I think of it as like a lottery scratch off ticket. Based on what the person is saying, you scratch off one of your numbers. You know there's potentially a winning number. And I think most people just scratch off a couple numbers and they scan the barcode and figure out if they won. They go, oh, okay, perfect. I know your situation. Let's go to demo. And then hope that the scan is right. They win the lottery ticket. In this case, I think that people do a good job of getting a statement and not narrowing down on it to understand what information is missing from what they told me. For example, someone goes, we want to increase lead response times. What are they now? Where do you want them to go? Why do you want to increase lead to response times? So you're going to get deeper and deeper and deeper down. How are you planning to do so? What metrics can you affect? What's your percentage of conversion right now? There's so many different questions you can start going in and asking. And I think that the area that could be interesting, let's say you're like Drift or someone with an AI like chatbot on the site. Have you considered that when people land on your site and they go to fill out a form, and they wait a couple days before they get a response? Let's say you do it on a Friday night. Are they getting a response on Monday morning? Are they getting a response Wednesday afternoon? Have you considered how that may be impacting your lead to response times right now? And then they're like, okay, it's starting to open up the intrigue of, well, what other way is there? If nobody's working over the weekend, how do we engage them quicker? So the way that they would do it is the AI starts auto vetting and communicating with them on the back end and immediately routing them to the right people and getting that stuff into the motion so that they don't fall through the cracks or go on a competitor site. Those are the kind of provoking questions you can do to start basically showing someone that they may not have thought all the potential solutions about it, but not telling them, hey, you should get this AI chatbot because it auto vets. And you're not bringing them through the story arc, the journey of the store before you get. If he just said, what favorite state is your oyster in the beginning before I asked for the shrimp, I'd be like, what do you mean? I don't know. It would not have had the same effect. It was a connection of questions.
What you did there was brilliant, and I'm gonna kind of build on that last part because I know you and I are both good friends with Morgan Ingram, and Morgan Ingram says this all the time: connect the dots, right? And that's like exactly what you're doing. It's like you can't go from step one to step five, right? Like if you walk in the store, hey, I'd like a pound of shrimp. Oh, hey, what's what state is your favorite oyster from, right? Then it's like, can I just have my shrimp? But it's
Yeah.
like you're going through that process, right? It's like that's why I love the phrase peeling back the onion, because you don't just like go from the first layer to the core of the onion, right? It's like there's so many layers that you have to pull back before you just kind of go there. And that's the magic of the buyer's journey, right? Is that it just kind of goes like gradual and gradual and gradual, and the intrigue just like builds and builds and builds. It's not like that question is like so good that it's going to work at any time. It's the progression of questions, right? That like really keeps drawing you in a little bit more. So let's kind of pull on that thread a little bit, because obviously I love the question breakdown that you had. And you're not saying to those people like, hey, you're not responding to your leads quickly enough. My chatbot could help you do that, right? Like you're taking them through that progression. How would you recommend folks start to find that progression that works for them, right? Like let's say someone's listening right now and they don't have quite that natural progression of events that leads to that intrigue, which organically leads to your tool solving that problem that you're progressing towards. How would you suggest folks get started on something like that?
So this is actually part of like one of the offerings I teach teams on, which is intuitive discovery execution. The questions I am asking are all and only based off of what the buyer is saying in their responses to your questions. So if someone says we're looking to improve lead to response time, we have lofty growth goals, and we're really focused on digital transformation. I would stick away from digital transformation because it's not really easily definable, and that could mean a million different things, lead down a rabbit hole, and the response you may get might not be great. We have lofty growth goals. Okay, you could be like, what are your growth goals and where you are today? But that kind of might not lead you in the right direction either. I would go immediately into, why do you want to improve your lead to response time? And then they'll go, well, it's this. We're trying to improve the conversion rate because the growth goals are here and we're not quite meeting quota. Okay, you mentioned that it's not quite where you want it to be. Where is it today? And you keep using their words over and over and over again to create an organic conversation. Us as salespeople, we're so weird that in every other situation in life, you know, you would never act the way we do as salespeople. Salespeople have almost a checkbox. Oh, this was a good question I asked one day about which state the oysters. We're like, oh, like what would it mean if we were able to get you a 5% increase? Like, drop all that crap. Ask them the natural questions based on what they're saying. It's like if and I've done this in a video before. It's like if your daughter came into the room, she's 16, she says, "My boyfriend broke up with me." And you go, "Awesome, how's your friends?" It doesn't make sense. You wouldn't skip that over. You'd be like, "Oh my God, what happened? How are you?" Like, you would go into the details of what they said, not what you want to ask next.
This is a stroke of brilliance here, and let's use the example that you had, because someone could have walked in the store right after you and they could have said, "Hey, what state is your favorite oysters from?" And it could have totally went over their head, right? So it's like every person sort of has like a different question that kind of like hits home for them. So I think you said it perfectly. It's like you're organically using what the other person gives you and then kind of going down that path thereafter. So it's like everything wants to be scaled and, templatized, right? And just like trying to turn things into a process. And I love what you said, like just organically helping people do discovery, right? Like based on what the other person tells you, then that's how you decide to reply. And I'll plug myself here. We kind of said this pre-show, like I have no questions planned when I walk into a podcast episode. I just like organically take what the guest gives me and we kind of keep going on it. So let's kind of go down this rabbit hole a little bit further. Like, because you're obviously a very good question asker. That's kind of how I found you in the beginning place. So you're really, really good with discovery. What would be, how to say this? What would be some of the ways that you would recommend folks improving their discovery, right? Because maybe they're kind of being spoon fed of, hey, you got to ask these qualification questions, or maybe their sales leader is giving them a set of questions that they need to use or whatever. How would you kind of help folks realize, like, hey, how can I take my discovery to the next level by doing intuitive discovery, like you said?
So you have to focus a lot on these like active listening exercises. There's so many times where I'll run through with a client of mine and we'll listen to a discovery and they're like, "I think it went really well." We go back and we listen and I stop the call, and this is perfect for you to do your own calls. After the buyer gets done saying a statement, you stop the call, you don't listen to the question you asked, and you say to yourself, "What information do I know based on what they just said? And what is still unclear? How can I write 3 questions in the place of the 1 question I asked?" And you start writing all those out. And then you listen to your response and you kind of gauge, okay, did it get kind of what I wanted? Is the phrasing right, etc. You go to the next thing. You keep doing this over and over again. And you stop thinking about what you were trying to do in the call and you start thinking about what you know and what is still on the table. What is not scratched off on the lotto ticket. And then the best thing is discovery is not over at discovery. Go before your next demo. Like, and I've had so many clients be like, "Oh my God, I miss all this, this, and this." They start off the demo being, "Hey, excited to dig into the demo today. Here are the things we know so far. Here are the things that are still unclear. And here's the priority of the demo that we wanted to focus to address some of those things originally that we are clear on. Can you help me understand these real quick before we get started?" And you get the person, back in the state they were in the discovery call.
Right.
Then you kind of get them to give you more of the clarity that you needed to have a really solid business case and understanding of their situation. So running yourself back through your own calls is tedious and it's time consuming. But if you do even like 1 a week, you're going to get better and better and better. Do it with a friend, do it with your manager, do it with yourself. It doesn't matter. Just really pay attention to what the buyer is saying and then what you still don't know because of it. That will get you so much better at asking these questions and thinking of different ways to get to that information over time.
One of my favorite tips ever is to click mute when the prospect is talking, right? Like so many people come in with these questions and they're not done talking, right? Like sometimes people take pauses, and sometimes if you just have that uncomfortable silence for 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, they'll keep talking and they'll keep giving you more information. But sometimes we're just so dead set on asking our questions and checking off our checklist. So I think you put it so perfectly there, is like, you're looking for what you don't know yet. I've never heard it said that way. Do you maybe kind of like have a little story of how you kind of came to that conclusion yourself, right? Because that's a really perfect way to put it, is like you're asking questions to figure out what you don't know yet based on what you've just heard. How did you kind of come to that?
So I've been running a lot of these discovery coaching calls for teams for the past like couple of years now, and I realize that a lot of people, when they coach a discovery call, they just say whether something was right or wrong. They tell you how to rephrase a question. But I think one of the biggest things that's missing is we forget how to actively listen. And when you're in the heat of a call, like I still mess up today, I miss things. I don't hear them right. I ask a silly next question that's more selfish than natural. But once I realized and started going back through my own and being like, all right, what questions should I have asked at this point? What is the information that I don't have? What do I not know to make sure this business case is solid and I actually have an ROI? Once I nailed on that, I started implementing it with sales reps. And over a month, 2 months, I saw them progressively get better at where they were digging, where they weren't, where they would recap. Like they would do like discovery clusters. They'd ask a couple questions. They say, all right, just make sure if I'm hearing this correct. Yeah, dot, dot, dot. Now we're anchoring them in their words. It gave them a second to think about what their next question should be. And they're keeping the buyer feeling like they're heard. So it's been really meaningful because now, like, if you practice active listening when you're not live in the call, you'll get better at doing it while you're in the call next time, because you're now listening for different stuff. Oh, we have this type of, CRM, or we with digital transformation. That might be the buzzword people are thinking. Oh, digital transformation, tell me more about that. But that's not it. That's not what you should be listening for. You're listening to the vagaries. Oh yeah, we're really looking to grow. Cool. I'll show you how you can grow. What is the growth? Why grow in the first place? Those are the things that people fail to listen to. But if you were out with your friend and they were telling you a heartfelt story, you would ask those questions because it's natural, it's human.
That's I give this example all the time. It's like, if you were like telling me about a girl that you met, right? Like, I wouldn't, you'd be like, oh, she's really nice. I wouldn't be like, oh, you should marry her because she's nice, right? Like, I was like, oh, what do you like about her, right? Like, how's her, and you like, that's a perfect example. I could like go down this rabbit hole for a really long time, but I do want to give you time to talk about Stas. So let's wrap all this up in a bow really quick, and then we'll talk about Stas and Arkenstone. For our sellers who are listening, our B2B sellers, we appreciate you for still listening. What would be the one big takeaway that you would give to them from all this, right? I know we talked about a lot of stuff in the weeds here, but if there was one thing that folks take away from this call, what would you want it to be?
So the biggest thing is I think what this person did, where they made it a really, really natural process where I did not feel like I was being sold. I was being taken on this journey based on what this person perceived. They saw me look, they asked a question, if like, say, are you into oysters? I am. Oh, interesting. What kinds have you had? East Coast, West Coast. Perfect. What state? Now it's such a natural progression. I think as sellers, we don't do that. We're thinking of the next selfish question that we want to ask because it's what's laid out to see whether this is a deal or not. But if we really get people to open up, we'll end up uncovering more information. We'll know if it's a deal based on if it's worth them changing in the first place. So I want you to really actively listen and pay attention to your clients as opposed to running them through a script.
I'm going to go ahead and plug what you said earlier too. The listening back to your calls and pausing after the prospect, the client, the buyer, whoever it is done speaking. and then write down, okay, what do I know? What don't I know? What are the vagaries, or whatever the word is. Um, that is one of the best sales prep exercises I personally have ever heard. So I'm going to double onto Ryan's and say, listen to your calls, folks. Go in there and actually do the exercise. I know that it'll pay big dividends. So let's go down the stats route. Obviously, you just recently started Arkenstone. You're a great discovery seller, great problem-based seller, and you obviously want to bring that to teams. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about stats and what all that is?
Yeah, so I've been in and out of sales training for a long time. I've been running this practice for over a year. But now I finally get to be out in the open about it. I'm very excited to make this my full-time thing because it's my favorite thing. You know, having to hold employees accountable of the numbers and downturns in markets, firing, hiring. That's not as fun as training people to become more skilled. But I realized this really pervasive issue within sales training. It's this massive ticket price. They come in, they talk at your team, maybe engage them a little for a couple hours, usually during a kickoff or a QBR, and then they leave. And they never make sure that it's reinforced. They never really customize it enough for the buyer so that these reps are getting the value out of the training. So SaaS, sales training as a service, is the model I've been implementing with much better results. It's not a one and done training program. It's actually understanding what are the real problems we are trying to solve in their business, same way that they're going to do to their clients. What are the skill gaps that we have to uncover and work on, and then meeting on a weekly basis to practice, train, engage, listen, role play, all of these different things over a spread out period of time. First of all, it's saving my clients the upfront money of just dropping a huge piece of budget onto a training that they don't know is going to work. It's stretched out for a purpose that people do not learn one and done. I want it to be at the end of the engagement that the reps are actually able to train each other and other people that are coming in to do it. So between top of funnel, problem-centric prospecting, or discovery execution, this is a model I think that a lot of the people that I've ran a lot of discovery on the market to say, what do you hate about sales training? What do you love? What do you wish? This is what I've concluded to needs to happen to the industry.
You're doing the classic, like, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man the fish, feed him for a lifetime, right? Like, that's exactly what you're doing. Like, you can't just come in one day, a weekend, a week, whatever it is, for a few hours and expect that people are not only going to retain what you taught them, but that they're going to continue to improve on what you've taught them, right? Like, there's kind of two elements to it. There's not just the retainment of information. There's like the constant progression of like getting better and better and better. It's like you're never like done learning discovery, right? I mean, even you said earlier, like sometimes I listen back to calls and I miss stuff. I miss stuff too. Like, anyone who says they don't miss stuff, sorry, you're a liar. Like, you have no credibility at that point. So it's like almost being an athlete in a sense, where you constantly have to be perfecting your craft and constantly have to be improving on the things that you need to improve on. And I think you really hit the nail on the head with this model. So I'm really excited to see what comes of it.
Me too. Me too. Off to the races.
My man, anything else you want to plug before we jump?
No, I mean, listen, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Ryan Scalera, or you can check out the website, arkenstonegtm.com. I'll also have a link on LinkedIn to get there. But going to be releasing a lot more content. Looking forward to seeing how we can change the world of sales a little bit.
Amen to that. Go check out arkenstonegtm.com. That's spelled Arken, stone spelled usual. Ryan, this has been a blast. One of my favorite episodes in a really long time. I love all of our guests, but this one was completely on another level. Sales stories in real life. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next week. Cheers.
Cheers.